Curious George Mother's Day Surprise. George loves springtime in the city. Today, George is playing a concert in the park with his friend Marco. The band finished playing and everyone clapped. Then Marco and George heard someone in the crowd say, What a perfect way to spend Mother's Day! Oh no! We forgot about Mother's Day, said Marco. Mommy does so much for us. It is too late to do something special for her today. They had to think fast. George had an idea. Yes, a party, said Marco. Great idea, George. We can decorate and cook for her. Cook all of her favorite foods, said his sister. Cecilia, if Mommy sees us cooking, she will want to help, said Marco. It should be a surprise. We can have a surprise party at our house, said the man with the yellow hat. Perfect, said Marco. Poppy can tell Mommy we are on a play date with George. Then they can come to pick us up at 5 o'clock. Great idea, said Cecilia. But we will have to hurry. Let's get going. George and Marco rushed home to start decorating. We can make a piñata, Marco said. Hunley made a great model. Cecilia and the man picked up fresh veggies at the market. Avocados, hot peppers, carrots, onions, and tomatoes. At home, everyone helped cook Mommy's favorite foods. George prepared the hot peppers very carefully. Then everyone helped decorate the living room. George hung streamers. The man helped blow up balloons. The decorating was almost done. But something was missing. We don't have any flowers, said Marco. They had to think fast. Marco had an idea. We can make them out of paper. Everyone helped make paper flowers. It took a long time and made a mess. Some were better than others. By the time they finished the flowers, it was almost time for the party. Marco and Cecilia looked outside. They're coming! We have to hurry, said Marco. Everyone rushed to clean up. They put the last decorations in place and set the table with food very quickly. They're almost here, said Cecilia. Quick, everyone hide. Everyone found a hiding spot just in time. Some spots were better than others. When the door opened, they all yelled, Surprise! Happy Mother's Day, Mommy, said Marco and Cecilia. Mommy was so surprised. This is the best Mother's Day ever, she said. The surprise party was a success. George and Marco's homemade piñata was a hit too. The end. What is your favorite part of the story? My favorite part of the story is where they said some flowers were better than the others. This book is Curious George at the Aquarium. This is George. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. Today, George and the man with the yellow hat were visiting the aquarium. George, said the man, please wait here while I buy the tickets. George tried to wait, but he was so excited. What was inside? He wanted to look over the walls, but they were too high. Just then he heard a splash and a whoosh. Water flew high into the air. People cheered. What could that be? George was curious. He hopped over the gate into the aquarium. How surprised he was! Swimming right in front of George was two beluga whales. The mother and the baby beluga whale swam right past him. And not far away was a family of sea lions, diving and splashing. What fun! George noticed people walking toward a big door. Could there be more to see? He followed the crowd. Now where was he? It was darker inside and there were fish everywhere. George did not know where to look first. In one tank, there were sharp-toothed piranhas. In another tank, there were seahorses. In another tank, there was a large octopus. George saw a group of children across the room. An aquarium staff member was pointing to different sea creatures. This is a starfish. This is a clam. And this is an urchin. Nearby there was a long, low, colorful tank. It was perfect for touching. George was curious. As he reached his hand into the water, a large crab came scuttling from under a rock right toward his finger. Snap! Ouch! Poor George. He didn't like this exhibit. Do not touch. George slipped out a door into the sunlight. But oh, what was going on here? George saw a fat, funny-looking black and white fish under the water. He watched as they flew. As he watched, they flew up out of the water. What kind of fish does that? And where did they go? George wondered. Where penguins live. George climbed up and into their exhibit. They were not fish at all, but penguins, of course. George hopped like a penguin, flapped his wings like a penguin, and waddled like a penguin. A crowd gathered and laughed, but when he slid on his belly like a penguin, the aquarium staff stopped by to check on the penguins. A monkey in the penguin exhibit? George opened the door to escape, but instead, all the penguins ran out. Penguins everywhere! The staff was angry at George. How could they catch all the penguins? In all the excitement, nobody noticed the penguin chick falling into the water. No one but George. The baby penguin hadn't learned how to swim yet. As only a monkey can, George scuttled the rope hanging over the beluga tank and swung over to the water and saved the chick. The director of the aquarium and the man with the yellow hat heard the commotion and came running. That monkey helped the baby penguin, said the boy in the crowd. No one else could have saved him, said the girl. The director thanked George for his help and made him an honorary staff member of the aquarium. George said goodbye to his new penguin friends. He could not wait to come back to the aquarium and visit them again. The end. What was your favorite part of the story? My favorite part of the story is where George saw the octopus. Curious George's Subway Train Adventure. George was up early. Today they were going to the zoo. We are taking the subway, said the man with the yellow hat. It was George's first subway ride. The subway is a train that runs under the ground, said the man. It takes people and little monkeys to places all over the city. George cannot wait to see the trains. He ran down the stairs, through the gate, and right into the police officer. Wait, George, we have to pay first, the man called. It's okay, monkeys ride for free, said the officer. They walked to the track and waited. George was confused. Where was the train? Don't worry, George, said the man. The train should be here soon. Let's go look at the map. We are here at Endless Park Station. We are going to take the train all the way up to the zoo. Would you like a submarine map of your own? Asked the man. George nodded his head yes. Okay, wait here. While George waited, the train pulled into the station. George was so excited to get on the train, he forgot to wait for his friend. The man saw George on the train, but the doors closed before he could get on. I'll meet you at the next station, shouted the man. George wasn't worried. He decided to explore the train. Hello there, said the conductor. Would you like to help me drive the train? This is how I control the speed. Brakes and doors, she explained. George honked the horn and moved the lever forward. The train started. George got off at the next station. The man's train arrived, but there were too many people for him to exit. I'll wait for you at the next stop, the man called. Honk, honk. George was curious. He could hear the next train coming, but where was it? He turned around and saw one behind him. He climbed aboard. At the next stop, George realized he was back at Endless Park. How did he get there? Luckily, the police officer was there to help. The track with the up arrow goes uptown to the zoo. The track with the down arrow goes downtown to Fisherman's Wharf. Now George knew to follow the up arrow. When his train stopped at a tunnel, George saw his friend on another train. George, take the train all the way to the zoo, shouted the man. Finally, he arrived at the zoo stop. The man was there too. George loved riding the subway, but next time he would stay close to his friend. The end. What is your favorite part of the story? My favorite part of the story is where George came back to Endless Park. George and the Pizza Parties. George was a good little monkey, and always very curious. Today he wasn't just curious, he was excited. So excited, in fact, that he was turning flips and standing on his head. A little girl in George's building had invited him to her pizza party. George had never been to a pizza party before, but he had loved parties and he had loved pizza, so he knew it had to be good. To George, it's a pizza party. Day Saturday time, 4 p.m. Place, apartment 2. George, it's time for the pizza party, said the man with the yellow hat. Have fun and remember to be on your best behavior. George got to the party in perfect time. Hi, George, called out the little girl. But oh, what was all of this? The children were wearing puffy white chef hats and checkered aprons. George got a hat and an apron too. The best was yet to come. They weren't just going to eat pizza, they were going to make it too. Everyone will get a piece of pizza dough to roll out and make a special pizza, explained the girl's mother. There were many little lumps of dough. But first, let's play some games, she said. Everyone went into the living room to pin the pepperoni on the pizza. Everyone, that is, except George, he was curious about the pieces of dough. George thought and thought, if lots of little pieces of dough were good, maybe a huge one would be even better. He gathered lumps of dough together and squished them until it became the very biggest piece of dough he had ever seen. What fun! Maybe rolling it out would be even more fun. George poured flour out on the table. He rolled and rolled and rolled the dough with the rolling pin. It was messy work. First he bumped over one of the chairs. Crash! Then he knocked the sack of flour. Thump. The flour looked like snow laying on the floor of the kitchen. George liked snow, so he didn't mind at all. Soon he gotten the dough nice and thin. But the thinner it got, the farther it spread out. Before he knew it, the dough covered the table, then the chairs, then George. Without the flour, it started to stick to everything, including George. George stopped to think maybe the dough will be better off in small pieces after all. George got a pair of scissors and began cutting up the dough into lots of different shapes. He thought everyone would be pleased. George, what have you done to the kitchen? The little girl's mother didn't look very happy. I think it's time for you to go home now. How surprised and sad George was. Just then the children burst into the kitchen. They saw the mess that George had made. George, what happened? Asked one boy. The other children looked at the shapes that George had made with wide eyes. Wow, George, I've never seen pizza dough like that before, said the little girl, smiling. Well, said her mother, if you can clean up this mess quickly, George, I suppose you can still stay to make a pizza. The children all helped George clean the kitchen. He was lucky to have so many good friends. As they worked, they talked about the pizza. I'm going to make a pizza that looks like a star, said one little boy. I'm going to make a pizza that looks like a house, said the girl. Once the kitchen was clean, the real fun began. All of the children picked out perfect pieces of dough and got to work. They spooned on tomato sauce and sprinkled on cheese. They added lots of vegetables and pepperoni. The pizzas looked wonderful. One looked like a rainbow, others like a stop sign, and still another like a balloon. There were even pizzas that looked like Curious George. Well, George, said the little girl's mother, the pizzas taste great, and thanks to you, they look wonderful too. Everyone agreed. It was the best pizza anyone had ever seen or tasted. For the second time that day, George was so happy he turned flips and stood on his head. Of course, it was a little harder to turn flips with so much pizza in his belly, but George didn't mind. It had been a wonderful pizza party. The end. What was your favorite part of the story? My favorite part of the story is where he made a big mess but actually made the pizzas look so pretty. This book is Curious George Builds an Igloo. It was a beautiful winter morning. George was up early. Next door, his friend Bill was up too. Bill was building a house out of snow. It's called an igloo, Bill said. I'm going to sleep in it tonight. George wanted to help. He also wanted to sleep in the igloo. It would be a lot of fun. George tried stacking some blocks of snow. It was not easy. They kept slipping and sliding. First, you make a circle in the snow, said Bill. The snow blocks go around the circle. This makes a sturdy base for more snow blocks to go on top. Bill showed George how to stack snow blocks on top of the base. Around and around they went until there was only a hole left at the top. The last piece is called a keystone, Bill said. It keeps all the other stone blocks in place. You have to fill in all the cracks, Bill said. This keeps the igloo nice and warm inside. They smoothed out the snow blocks. Bill and George filled all the spaces with snow. George was impressed, but Bill's igloo was a little small. George wanted to build his own igloo, a big igloo that could fit his bed and some friends and maybe a party with music. George got to work. This time he made the circle bigger. He stacked the snow blocks around and around, just as Bill had taught him. George worked on his igloo until the sun went down. It was a big igloo. It even had a window. But George was a tired monkey. He did not have time to fill in all the cracks with snow. The man with the yellow hat helped move George's warm bed into the igloo. George bundled up and went to sleep. Soon George woke up. He was very cold. The window was drafty. The cracks were letting the cold air in. George really wanted to spend a night in an igloo. What could he do? Then George had an idea. The man had told George to come inside if he got cold. So George worked quickly and built a new igloo in his living room. It was nice and warm inside the house. He crawled into his new igloo and went to sleep again. The living room was the perfect temperature for sleeping, but it was too warm for a house made of snow. George's indoor igloo began to melt. When George woke up the next morning, his igloo had melted. It had turned into a big puddle and a big mess to clean up. Lucky for George, his outdoor igloo was still standing. The big igloo was too cold for sleeping, but it was just right for a party. George and his friends spent the whole winter playing in this big igloo until it melted away in the spring. The end. What is your favorite part of the story? My favorite part of the story is when at the end, George's big igloo was just right for a party. Thank you for reading with me.